Violent crime in South Africa is way out of hand. The capacity of the state to deal with escalating violent crime is becoming seriously diminished. But are South Africa's political parties taking this seriously enough? Well, we at the Free Market Foundation don't think so. That's why we have initiated the Section 12 initiative, which aims to foreground the issue of violent criminality and how to deal with it as we run up to South Africa's elections on the 29th of May. My name is David Ansara. I'm joined by my colleague, Martin van Staden. He's the head of policy here. I'm Chief Executive Officer. So Martin, what is the Section 12 initiative and why have we, as the Free Market Foundation, decided to undertake this project?
Yeah, thanks, David. So broadly, this 2024 election is being described as the most important election of a generation for various reasons. Yet, when we looked at kind of what's on offer from the various political parties, including the incumbent government and the most prominent opposition parties, we don't get a sense that anything new as far as arguably our biggest crisis is on the table, which is violent crime. That is certainly, in my view, a bigger issue than load shedding, than water infrastructure falling apart, than corruption even, which is crime. But violent crime, the rates that we experience in South Africa, something like 86 people murdered a day, something like 5 reported rapes every hour.
3 children murdered per day.
It's insane. But at the same time, it is normal. It is regular. And it is just another aspect to South African society. And that alone is totally unacceptable. And we at the Free Market Foundation thought that, listen, it's really time to foreground violent crime, especially in the context of this all-important general election. So the Section 12 initiative, which is based on Section 12 of the Constitution, which says that all South Africans, all people in South Africa really, are entitled to be free from all forms of violence, both private and public. And we decided, listen, this constitutional provision is being ignored. Let's bring it to the fore and make a big deal out of it.
Yeah, and I think what's paradoxical about the current state of affairs in South Africa is that the capacity of the state is breaking down everywhere we look. And this is really the core function of the state, is to uphold the rule of law and to ensure the peace in society. It's not doing that, but at the same time, we see the scope and the size of government expanding into all areas of private life and commerce. So we have this vast array of regulations, whether it's BEE or labor regulatory provisions that constrict the labor market, any aspect of business, whether it's mining, manufacturing, the energy sector is very tightly controlled by the government still. So there's this weird contrast that as the state loses its ability to enforce its basic obligations, it's also engaging in this pretense of trying to micromanage everyone.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, just on that, it's because the act of criminalizing is rightly seen by everyone around the world as one of the most substantive things that the state can do. I mean, you haven't really done anything when you've criminalized something, but it's so severe, it's so significant that we equate it with an action. So as the capacity of government collapses and it becomes increasingly aware that it can't actually do anything really anymore, it has substituted. It has brought in this act of criminalization, which seems to be substantive. So it's very much a facade, but at the same time, because it is perceived to be such a significant move, it does have this chilling effect in the economy and in social life. Because if something is criminalized, even though the government has no capacity to enforce that silly criminalization, people will still want to be seen as being law-abiding and they'll refrain from doing that thing. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding as far as how our economic activity is being ground to a halt by other things, but also certainly by over-criminalization.
Yeah, and I think the criminals run rampant. They sort of do as they please, whereas the law-abiding citizens are the ones who bear the brunt of this over-criminalization. All right, so let's get back to the project itself. I think most South Africans would agree that crime is a really urgent priority. I saw the Brenthurst Foundation poll putting that as the #1 key concern amongst the registered voters. So let's delve into the project a little bit more. What are we proposing, and what are some of the steps that we are demanding that public representatives take to alleviate this serious problem?
So first, the issue is that no one really wants to engage in a real criminal justice reform. Certainly not the incumbent governing party, no opposition party. All of them effectively say police harder. That's effectively what it comes down to. We will appoint better police officers. We will ruthlessly enforce the law as it stands. And that's necessary, that's good. But that doesn't even come close to addressing really the fundamental issue here. And the Free Market Foundation, as we do in all of our initiatives, we kind of try to get to the root of the problem. And what we've identified is effectively, we call it 4 Ds of criminal justice reform that's necessary in South Africa. And I'll try and briefly just go through them. The first one is definition. So here we have an issue that is not just in South Africa, but it's all around the world. The essence is that people don't really know to what extent the notion of criminality has expanded in South Africa. For instance, if I record something on my phone and it's per definition a film and I distribute it on WhatsApp, I have broken a law. In terms of the Films and Publications Act, I could go to jail for 6 months, or I could be fined 100,000 rand. That's a crime. I know it's a crime. No one else knows it's a crime. I can promise you that. So we have an issue of definition. Crime, the very idea of crime has not been properly defined for your average person in South Africa. That's a problem. It's a rule of law violation. People need to know what the law is, especially if it could land them in jail or expose them to financial jeopardy. So we need to define criminality. What we're proposing in terms of this definition aspect is, well, firstly, what we're doing is we are developing a criminalization index. We've already published that, so it's available. It's constantly being expanded. So currently it's still at a very early stage of development, but it already shows quite a few crimes. What it does is show, as far as we can, what is a crime in South Africa. And it includes what I just said about filming. What we're proposing as a policy initiative is that Parliament must adopt what we're calling a criminal code, which would be a legalized version of our criminalization index, which is one act of Parliament that lists every single thing that you could end up in jail for in South Africa, or which you could be fined for in South Africa and get a criminal record. So that would include national, provincial, and local government. So we need to address the definition aspect of criminality in South Africa. That's number one. The second thing is development. This is where currently all political parties are preoccupied with, only development, and that is we need to give police officers more resources, we need to give prosecutors more resources, we need to give the correctional services more resources. That is something that I think is adequately identified as a problem, but it's only one aspect of it. One issue is we have not just a violent crime issue, but as far as the government is concerned, a general crime issue, yet we're not building more prisons. Why is that? How does that work? How do we expand the notion of crime so endlessly without building capacity for tens of hundreds of thousands of people to go and sit in prison? That's a problem. We need to build more prisons. Crucially, we need to separate violent offenders from non-violent offenders. And even more crucially, we need to separate those who are awaiting trial, who have not been convicted of anything, from any other criminals. If they are to be kept in detention, they have to be held completely separately, and that's not happening in South Africa.
And there are arguably thousands of people who are existing in this kind of purgatory state where they've been held as captives of the state. But they haven't actually been prosecuted formally yet, and that is a grave injustice. All right, so there are a couple of other Ds. We've gone through 2 of them. The third one is decriminalization. Explain. So
this is kind of, as far as we as liberals are concerned, the biggest issue and the biggest thing that could fundamentally change policing in South Africa and law enforcement. If we take off the table the things that our prosecutors and our police officers and our prison capacity should not even be able to consider, that would free them up to focus on real, harmful, violent crime. So what we want is the police, prosecutors, corrections to focus on what is in jurisprudence called the mala in se, those things that are per definition malicious criminal activities: murder, rape, assault, trespass, malicious damage to property, fraud, all those things that would simply be crime even without some politician saying it's a crime. That is what government needs to be focused on, because that is where the harm is. That is why South Africa is not seeing investment from any foreigners. That is why every poll has crime at the top as the most urgent issue. People don't have these other crimes in mind. They have what I just said in mind: murder, rape, robbery, etc., hijackings, the trio crimes, house burglaries, and so forth. That is what government needs to be focused on. Everything else we want to take off the table. Prostitution. You can think what you want about it. The fact is, we don't want that space in a prison cell to be taken up by someone other than a murderer. What I said about filmmaking. There's another crime. If you're on public transport, like on a taxi or on a train, and you willfully inconvenience a fellow passenger, you have committed a crime for which you could be put in jail for, I think, 3 months and fined up to 150,000 rand.
There's upcoming tobacco legislation,
Yes.
which will prohibit you from smoking inside.
Yes.
Even if you're in your own home.
Exactly.
And your domestic worker is working there, that now constitutes a workplace environment.
Even if she isn't there, the fact is, if it's a workplace, if the location is used as a workplace, so if you work there as someone working from home, or the domestic worker works there on Mondays and Fridays, it's a workplace. It's always a workplace, so you can't smoke there. That's what the new tobacco bill would criminalize. So it's ridiculous that such things are still being adopted, but there's tens of thousands of such crimes already. They need to disappear from what a prosecutor could consider, because when the National Prosecuting Authority, when it incentivizes its policy around prosecutions, it looks at raw prosecution rates. It doesn't say if you prosecute murder, you get a bonus or whatever. We just want you to prosecute. So obviously you're going to prosecute easier crimes, and that's understandable. You can't blame the prosecutors. That's a perverse incentive. So we need to take those nonsensical issues off the table. They shouldn't even be prosecutable. And obviously we don't want the police barging into your house, guns drawn. You're smoking in your own house, you're under arrest. We can't have that. So that has to get off the table so that our entire criminal justice cluster can focus on real crime, decriminalization. And then lastly, perhaps just as importantly, it's decentralization. This has thankfully come onto the national discourse in recent years in South Africa, but we want to foreground it and keep it at the foreground. And that is that the national law enforcement entities have shown themselves time and time again to not be able to take care of the violent crime issue. That includes the South African Police Service, that includes the National Prosecuting Authority, and certainly correctional services, amongst a few others, including anti-corruption bodies. That needs to be decentralized. We need to see more municipal and provincial police forces in substance, not just in name, like our Metro Police currently, which are glorified traffic wardens. We need real police forces at the provincial and the municipal level, but also prosecution. I think it's fair to say at this stage that we need to spread the load to the provinces and to the municipalities. In other countries like the United States, you have prosecutors at every level of government. It happens, we can do it as well. And certainly correctional services as well. There is no good reason to just have one single correctional services institution in South Africa. Give that power at least to the provinces to also have their own provincial correctional services. And then the other aspect to that is private prosecutions. We have that in South Africa. It's very unique in the world, and we need to utilize that more, to let the private sector take the burden off the NPA to go after these cases, because the resources certainly are in the private sector to do so. And then the other thing that people very rarely think about, and that's this idea of watching briefs. That is where you, as a victim of a crime, or your lawyer, can get to go to the investigator or to the prosecutor in your case and make sure they're doing their job, to make sure they're not losing the docket or the evidence, or they're not fumbling the prosecution. You can sit there and you can make sure that they're doing it properly. That also needs to expand wildly, alongside other things like incentivizing neighborhood watches, empowering private security firms to tackle crime, at least in their limited domains, instead of attacking private security like our government currently is. And this is all decentralization. This is to take that centralized authority from the national government, from the central government, and spread it out, because that has been shown to be a powerful contributor around the world to addressing crime. If you are a police officer from a community, it just follows that you would have a passion to police that community better. And currently, that's not how our system is set up. So those are the 4 Ds. That is broadly what the Section 12 initiative is looking at. There is some peripheral things that we're doing as well, but that's the core of it. And we think that if government, not just the central government, but all aspects of government, and certainly society and business, starts taking these things seriously and putting these things to our political parties, whichever political party you support, and having them put it on the agenda. Maybe not all of them will be adopted, but at least some of it would influence the way we think about violent crime in South Africa. And we are pretty convinced that would lead to a discernible drop in violent crime rates.
All right, excellent. So for those of our audience who are watching at home, if they're interested in supporting this initiative, they can go to section12.org.za, and we'll put a link to that down in the description and in the pinned comment. But I think we would certainly encourage you to go and check that out, sign the pledge. You can send a communique, an email directly to your chosen public representative, whether that's a government official or a leader of an opposition party, and you can give your voice, lend your support to this very important campaign. But Martin van Staden, thank you very much. My name is David Ansara. Until next time, stay free.